Hi everyone, I'm Obscure Girl. This is my first ever video, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself really quick. I love movies. I love weird movies. I love weird, trippy movies, and especially I love movies that I feel like not enough people are talking about, if anyone are talking about them. I used to watch a lot of really random stuff with my mom, and to this day, that's the stuff I love the most. And I really love introducing new people to stuff that they might not have seen before. And a lot of times they end up liking what I tend to show them, or they're just really nice. I don't know. So I'm here to have this channel talking about weird, obscure movies that I feel like not nearly enough people are talking about. So without any further ado, let's get started with even more backstory about me, because that's just where this episode's going. Um, and this is going to get even more weird, but according to my parents, I was a very colicky baby, which means I never shut up. I was screaming all the time, which for my poor parents in their poor, tiny apartment building in Chicago was not the best for them and their poor neighbors. So I guess the only thing that finally shut this baby up was the 1939 classic, The Wizard of Oz. Now you might be saying, Obscure Girl, first of all, why are we talking about you as a baby? Second of all, The Wizard of Oz is probably the most famous movie of all time. Definitely not what I'd call obscure. And you'd be right on all counts. However, once my parents found out that that worked, they went out and they found every sequel, spin off, adaptation, cartoon version, everything they possibly could related to The Wizard of Oz to continue to shut said baby up without making them crazy watching the same thing over and over again like most parents have to do. So that brings us to my ultimate comfort movie, Return to Oz. 1985 movie starring a very young Fairuza Balk before she was in The Craft and Waterboy. Actually, the VHS version I have because, of course, I have a VCR because a lot of the movies that I love never ended up making it to DVD because they're just so random. So I have two VCRs still, actually. But the VHS version I have of it has Fairuza Balk introducing it, saying that it was her first movie and how much she loved it, which I always thought was super cool. Now, if you haven't seen this movie, you might have seen clips of it or at least have heard about it. It's definitely part of that era of movies that people fondly refer to as the 1980s when they were trying to toughen up your kids. Uh, Definitely a genre of movies that a lot of people today think were not for kids at all because what they did in those kids' movies is scarier and more traumatic than what has happened in some movies that were meant to scare adults. Uh, I loved them. I've loved them since I was a very young kid. If you can't tell, I like me some creepy things. So that has always been the case. And it probably started with this movie, if not with the original Wizard of Oz, if you really dig down into it. But let's not get into my therapy right now. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown about this movie. Spoiler warning is very much in effect, but if you want to see the movie first and then come back and we can talk about it, that I totally recommend. If you're the kind of person that sometimes, like me, you like seeing a spoiler review because you like knowing what you're about to get yourself into and knowing that spoiler reviews aren't always going to have like the how of things. So, like, I like hearing reviews about movies and knowing full well that even if you're getting the highlights, you're not getting the how they pull it off, which is a completely different experience in most cases, unless someone's literally reading off a script, which I will not be doing. So, without any further ado, Return to Oz. It starts off with Dorothy Gale, played by, again, Fairuza Balk. Um, she's actually 12 years old, I think, in this, and so significantly younger than Judy Garland, who was 16 when she was playing. They're both playing a 10-year-old. Um, Dorothy Dorothy was like 10. Um, it was a choice. It was all a choice. Also, this was right after Disney had gotten the rights to The Wizard of Oz, and they finally decided to do something with it, so they didn't lose that licensing. Um, and you, so Dorothy is still dreaming about Oz. Obviously, so you'd think that would be kind of a big deal for her. So she's still having dreams about it. She still talks about it and remembers it. Her Aunt Em comes in, who is played by Piper Laurie, Carrie's mom from the original Carrie, and she's done with it. She is over Dorothy talking about Oz. The neighbors are talking about it. She's crazy. She's Dorothy is too busy talking about Oz to really be help around the farm. And Aunt Em is very much like, hey, we've got stuff to do. And apparently Uncle Henry broke his leg in the tornado in the original Oz movie. At least that's what they're alluding to in this. And so they're still rebuilding their farm, or a new farm, I should say, because the original one is still in Oz. It got taken away by the tornado. Of course, Aunt Em and Uncle Henry don't know that's where it is. They just know it's gone, but it's still in Oz. So they're trying to rebuild a new house before winter. And again, you have a busted leg Uncle Henry and according to Aunt Em, Delulu Dorothy. So she's kind of done with it. So they decide they're going to take Dorothy to a doctor who has a new special treatment that can help with these kinds of delusions. Um, and before any of this happens, sorry, backtracking just a little bit, Dorothy finds this key on the farm as she's still talking about Oz and Uncle Henry, and Aunt Em's just like, I'm over it. And Dorothy finds this key that has an O with a line through it. And she's like, OZ, this is the key from Oz. And Aunt Em's like, that's from the old farmhouse. I've seen it a billion times. So it's still kind of playing a little bit off of this, was it a dream? Was it reality kind of situation, which part of me likes that they stuck to that. I like that, they tried to keep some of the original tone. Same thing with using actors from the real world in the Oz scenario. They kept that as well, which was really, really cool. Uh, so they take Dorothy to this specialist doctor with his new special treatment. I'm doing a lot of air quotes because, first of all, you go into this hospital. The nurse, played by Jean Marsh, who she was in Willow, she was basically like, hey, do you need a super scary lady? And it's in the 80s and we're doing a fantasy movie? Jean Marsh, we got you. She plays the nurse who is just scary. She's terrifying. She's very no nonsense, very like tight smile, like, yes, come this way kind of thing. And is also just very no nonsense. Like, I feel like everyone's got at least one grandma that's like her. And if you don't, then you had a better childhood than me. I don't know what to tell you. But they take her to this doctor who is the pinnacle of narcissism. This guy who is he invented this new treatment. He's all about, we're in the new century. Electricity is the new way of things. And very much just thinks the world of himself. You can automatically tell. And he's trying to show her that this new machine that he has made to help get rid of these bad dreams has a face. Because, of course, we're going to already start personifying the objects in this movie because it's an Oz movie. So then they take Dorothy to her room, and Em leaves her for the night. And there's this mysterious blonde girl. Now, when I was young and I saw this, I thought that was probably the prettiest girl I'd ever seen in my life. I thought she was just this gorgeous, mysterious blonde girl, and she comes out of nowhere, and it's all just like, ooh, who is she? Where did she come from? Is she even real? And she's basically telling Dorothy, like, immediately, like, you're my friend. I'm, gonna take care of you. So they take Dorothy in to get her procedure done, which is electroshock therapy. The new treatment is electroshock therapy. In the early days of experimental electroshock therapy. And that is what we are doing to the hero, most beloved protagonist girl of screen since the golden age of cinema. We're gonna electrocute the cray-cray out of her. So the electricity blissfully goes out right before the shock's about to start. And you hear all this creepy moaning and screaming, which is a whole level of discomfort. Again, things in this movie are better at scaring people than stuff that was meant to scare people that are grown. But then Blonde Girl shows up, undoes Dorothy, and it's like, we have to get you out of here. There are patients that have been damaged and locked in the cellar. So we have a little bit of time before they come back to do the same thing to you. Let's go. And of course, it's a lightning and thunderstorm outside because drama. And that's how the lights went out. And Dorothy and mysterious blonde girl end up escaping in all this drama. They're being chased by Nurse Jean Marsh and end up falling into this rushing river we assume blonde girl ends up just drowning because we don't see her again. Dorothy finds a crate to crawl into when she jumps in because it's that or get taken back to Zappy Town. And so Dorothy somehow survives the night on this crate. Savior blonde girl is now drowned and gone, and that's how we start this movie for children. Now, I should throw in there that this movie is a combination of the second and third Wizard of Oz books. And you might be saying, I'm sorry, second and third what? There was more than one? Actually, L. Frank Baum wrote 14 Oz books. 14. Plus a whole separate anthology series about the Wizard of Oz as well. Just the wizard, not the rest of the characters. So yeah, there's a lot. And a Cliff Notes version, because this isn't a book review, even though I could do those later. We'll see. We'll see what you guys like. But book 2 is introducing us to the characters Mombi, who has raised / enslaved this boy named Tip, and who creates this pumpkin-headed scarecrow named Jack. And Tip and Jack end up escaping Mombi and heading to Oz. And big surprise at the end, Tip is actually, you know what, I'll tell you who Tip is later. And in the third book, Dorothy ends up coming back to Oz and spends a lot of the rest of the series in Oz, actually. Another book that covers that later, which I will probably talk a little bit more at the end of the video, if you ever read the Dorothy Must Die series, it'll ruin your childhood, but it's so good. It's so good. And it goes into what happened, or a spin-off version of what happened after Dorothy comes back to Oz. And in that one, she becomes a power-hungry tyrant, which is great. It's so great. I'll talk about it later. So with that in mind, Dorothy wakes up in the crate with her chicken Billina, who can talk now. And her first thought is, oh, well, if Billina can talk, I must be in Oz. And somehow we just need to find how to get out of this river. And Billina's like, what river? And she looks around and she is in a crate in a puddle, which quickly goes away, surrounded by desert. Now, if you know anything about Oz lore, is the land of Oz is surrounded by the Deadly Desert, which if any living bio people, material, whatever, ends up in the desert, they turn into sand. Yeah, they just disintegrate into sand and become part of the desert. So Dorothy takes Billina, gets out of the crate, finds a rock formation that she then climbs her way because she's just on the edge of the desert. She doesn't have to go that far to get onto the green space of Oz. What's fun, though, is some of those rocks have faces. Moving faces that Dorothy and Billina are just very oblivious to. Those faces then are moving to a mountain and they can talk, and they're talking to someone. Not sure who. But they report that Dorothy is back in Oz and that she has a chicken. And this being higher up, whatever, seems very upset. Like, okay with the fact that Dorothy's back, very upset that there's a chicken. But we'll get there. They find a lunch pail tree, because of course they do, and make their way down the Emerald Road. Emerald Road? Really? Bad. The Yellow Brick Road to the Emerald City, past her old house, and it's like, oh yeah, hey, that's my house, and makes her way to the Emerald City, where there are no emeralds. The emeralds are gone, which definitely goes back off of the movie than the book, because in the original Oz book, the Emerald City actually isn't emeralds. They just make everyone entering the city put on green goggles and give everyone a green tinted vision to make it look like the whole place that is, I believe, predominantly silver is green and emerald-y. So in the movie, they were actually emeralds. So in this movie, they're actually emeralds. And so they make it through. They don't see any people. They see stone people and stumble across some headless stone women. That was cool. And then find that the Cowardly Lion and the Tin Man are also turned into stone. They have no idea what the heck is going on. Dorothy was all headed over to see the Scarecrow, to see her old friends, get things all figured out so she can get back home again, maybe have a nice little visit, and finds out that the Emerald City has gone to shiitake mushrooms. Everything on the stone, everything is creepy. And there's graffiti on the wall that says, "Beware of the Wheelers." Now, there's some debate among people that have seen this movie as to what is the scariest part of this movie. It's between the headlessness and between the Wheelers. Now, the Wheelers, played by the people that were pushing the carts in the hospital, are basically a street gang in Oz, but their hands and feet are wheels. And they have the most wonderful, creepy, traumatizing laugh you will ever hear in your life. It is like, I dare you, please tell me in the comments of a laugh that scares you more than the Wheelers laugh. I love me a good creepy laugh, so please treat me if you think there is one that is better than this. They end up chasing Dorothy. She gets cornered, but she finds a keyhole in the wall she's cornered in. She's like, "Oh, the key I have." And she unlocks it, locks herself in this cave, basically, where there is a bronze statue of kind of a guy that is just covered in cobwebs, not moving, not thinking. She walks up, reads the instructions on him, and finds out he's the Army of Oz, and she just needs to wind up his thinking, his speech, and his action to make him work. So Tick-Tock is his name. The Scarecrow put him in there before everything went down and he was taken, knowing that Dorothy would come and save all of them. So he wanted to give her her best fighting chance. So he sent her the key and locked up Tick-Tock to protect her. So Tick-Tock comes out, is kicking Wheeler butt left and right, so they're able to make it into the castle. However, the castle, again, Scarecrow is not there. Who is there? Mombi. Princess Mombi. Where Dorothy finds out, well, actually the Wheelers kind of tell her, but Mombi fills in the gaps, I believe, that the Gnome King, so all those rocks with faces are actually gnomes. The Gnome King came, took all the emeralds, and turned everyone into stone, and took the Scarecrow basically to stage a coup. He staged a coup in Oz, and Dorothy is the only one that can save Oz and her friends. So Princess Mombi is chilling in the castle, looking over the kingdom, while the Gnome King from his castle across the Deadly Desert is living it up rich with all these emeralds. So Dorothy goes and meets Mombi, who, very pretty, very extreme, very, very dangerous looking dress with like very, very sharp looking spiky things coming off of it. We love it. And finds out, "Oh, you're Dorothy Gale. All right, come with me." And leads her to her closet o' heads. She has 31 different women's heads that are all looking at her. They can all see her. You see their eyes moving. They are sentient heads. And Mombi gets to pick which head she wants per her mood, per the scenario. Like, heads are accessories. And you know what? Head number 4 fits for this afternoon. And so tells her that, Dorothy, your head's kind of pretty. Not beautiful or anything. So just totally like ugly, shaming a child. But it's like, when you're older, you'll probably be pretty gorgeous. So maybe I'll just lock you in the tower and then I'll take your head when it's ready. And she's like, "I believe you will not," but ends up taking her up. Of course, Tick-Tock's action winds down, so he's just a statue now in Mombi's castle. And she takes Dorothy up to the tower and locks her away with the chicken. And you think, like, okay, where do we go from here? And that's where we meet Jack. Again, from the second book, Jack Pumpkinhead, which actually was the inspiration behind the original part of Jack Skellington. That Tim Burton said that Jack Pumpkinhead was the inspiration for the Pumpkin King, pre him burning himself at the beginning of Nightmare Before Christmas and becoming Jack Skellington, which I just think is the coolest backstory ever. And if you think about it in your head enough, you can make it canon. Like, there's You can make fanfic out of that. You can make Jack Pumpkinhead into Jack Skellington with an Ozian backstory. It could work. Um, but I just think that's absolutely amazing. And also, the voice of Jack Pumpkinhead is Brian Henson, so Jim Henson's son. So that's fantastic. I will end up talking about the entire Henson family in this channel multiple times. So that's going to be fantastic. But the voice was actually perfect, and again, people might think he's kind of traumatizing and creepy, and I just see him as friend, like this friend, because baby me was just as twisted as adult me. And so Jack says that his mom created him with this powder of life that Mombi took, and he doesn't know where his mom is, and can he call Dorothy mom? And she's just like, okay. So Dorothy has now adopted a giant pumpkin head man, and they're trying to plan this way to escape. And they figure, well, she still has that powder of life with her original head. Why don't we get that? And there's this green moose-like head on the wall, which is called a Gump, which I find hilarious because the Gump is also the name of this fairy guy in Legend, which is another movie I'll talk about on this channel later. The director's cut, not the original. But then they're just going to put some couches together and they're going to create something and bring it to life, make it fly, and they can just fly their way out of there. And here's where I think the scariest part of the movie is, and in fact, possibly the scariest part of almost any movie ever. I'm not trying to upsell it or anything, but think of this this was for children. This was made for kids. This is an Oz movie. Dorothy has to go find the key of Mombi's that unlocks the heads, which is on Mombi's sleeping headless body. So Dorothy goes in, gets the key no problem, makes her way into the head closet. None of the heads are saying anything. Most of them are sleeping, I believe. And she unlocks the one cabinet that is a mirror, that's not a see-through glass case. And you see Jean Marsh's head with powder of life right behind it. So she goes in, is startled by the head kind of, and tips over the powder of life, which wakes up Mombi's head, and says in the creepiest, most horrifying voice you could possibly imagine. Again, I'm not trying to oversell this, but dear God, just Dorothy Gale. Like, it's insane. It's insane. And it's so good. And then the headless body shoots up, and you just see this headless body walking to try and capture Dorothy. Now all the other heads are woken up, and they're just screaming in their bodiless cases. And this is traumatizing, and it's great, and I love it. So she gets the powder of life, wakes up TikTok. They make their way in there, and things are kind of screwy. Things are only half assembled, but they're in a rush now. So while they have a half assembled, brought to life Gump, which is 2 couches and some ferns for wings and a Gump head, they all just make their way out the window across the deadly desert with a falling to pieces spacecraft that is sentient over the desert that could turn them into just sand, just disintegrated human flesh. I love this movie. I love it so much. So they make their way over to the Gnome King's mountain, and they, fall their way into Gnome King's throne room, I suppose. And the Gnome King, no surprise, is the doctor from the hospital, who is just as much of a narcissist, who is a massive, massive gaslighter. Like, this was my introduction to gaslighting as a child. So, I mean, if nothing else, that equipped me to know when adults and people were being BSy with me growing up, was just from seeing this guy. But find out he's just in his head has spun everything to where it's like, that was his only option. When they made Oz, they stole all the emeralds from his mountain. So he was just taking his stuff back. And the Gnome King has the ruby slippers, which was, Dorothy had said in her earlier appointment with the doctor that when she came back through her way back home, the shoes had fallen off. The Gnome King says they fell off and fell right into his path. And so that was how he was actually able to take over Oz and, you know, kidnap and or stonify her friends and her chosen family, basically. And is kind of just like, yeah, no, this was all your fault. Like, thank you so much. I was able to right all these wrongs and come into power like I was always supposed to. But yeah, this was all on you. And so he decides, you know what? I like games. Let's play a game. I have a whole collection room, which he has this giant museum like room full of tchotchkes. And he says, you guys will all get 3 guesses each because I have turned the scarecrow into an ornament. He's turned the scarecrow into some kind of bric-a-brac. And so they all get to take turns going into this room. They get 3 chances each to touch a thing, say Oz, and see if it turns into the scarecrow. So Dorothy is saved for last, which Tick-Tock had this bright idea, like he would act like his action had wound down, and she would go in, and he's like, I have 1 guess left. Maybe you can see what I turn into. Also, the Gnome King left out of this deal that if they guess wrong, they get turned into ornaments too. So he's just having this great day where he's just, any opposition is getting turned into tchotchkes, and he's just, you know, getting rid of opposition left and right in these fabulous ruby slippers, which they kept with the ruby thing. Same thing with they kept with the emeralds from the original movie, not from the book, because in the book they were silver. I'm sure you've heard that if you know anything about Oz. I just like saying it. So Dorothy goes in, doesn't see what Tick-Tock turns into, kind of a wasted thing, but kind of lets fate guide her, you know, does like closes the eyes, takes a deep breath, and realizes she touches this green, like diamond kind of, or emerald paperweight, basically, which turns into the scarecrow. Now, again, a lot of people are going to think that the scarecrow is horrifying in this. They're going to think that he is terrifying. They're going to think that he is nightmare fuel. Again, I just see friend. I see him and I see just as much the endearing scarecrow that's just this clumsy, wonderful, heartfelt guy from the original movie. And we'll figure out later what that says about me. I don't know. So Dorothy's like, you were green. Duh, of course. Ozians turn into green things. So then they start going around the room and just saying Oz on all these green things. And she's bringing everything back. And now the Gnome King's getting pissed. Also, they kind of leave out, it's kind of like really swept under the rug. So I'm big spoiler for the end of this movie coming in. If you know you don't want this spoiler, please pause, see the movie, come back, we'll chat. Billina is kind of nowhere to be seen. The chicken, nowhere to be seen. And you slowly realize Billina is hiding inside Jack's head because he's a jack-o'-lantern. He's been hollowed out. There's room for a chicken. But the Gnome King is getting pissed because he's not getting his way, and like all true narcissists, he starts acting out and throwing a temper tantrum and turning into this horrifying monster fuel of a thing. Now, I will say this probably multiple times in the series. I will take practical effects over CGI any and every day. And this movie is between motion, or not motion capture, kind of motion, no, claymation, basically. Between like claymation, between practical effects and makeup, there's not really any CGI in this movie. And it is 5 million times better for it. The gnomes look horrifying, straight up monster fuel, like nightmare fuel. And the sounds that make, whoever mixed the sounds for this deserves every award known to man for sound mixing. It's just a really, really great scene. So then the Gnome King's like, you know what? If I can't get rid of you my way, then I'm just going to eat ya. And so he takes Jack, and you slowly but surely see that Billina is so scared inside Jack's head that she lays her first egg. Because it's been this ongoing thing that Billina can't lay eggs, and they're going to cook her. She lays an egg, and it falls straight into the Gnome King's mouth. And that's why we find out that why gnomes don't like chickens, is because they're allergic to eggs. apparently you don't give a dog chocolate, you don't give a gnome an egg. And he dies in one of the most gruesome disintegration scenes. Like, it's awesome. Like, yeah, a lot of it, it's clay. It's not, this isn't Lord of the Rings level kind of stuff, but for the time, and honestly, just, if you're watching it, it's great. It is fantastic. Really messed up. And so they have to escape from the Gnome King's mountain, and they have to make their way back to basically Oz and the surface and all that stuff, and magically end up. Oh, right, Dorothy gets her shoes back and clicks her way back to Oz, wishes everyone back and safe and everything, and make their way back to Oz, which is fantastic. Yay! Love it. And she, wishes for everyone to be de-stonified and for things to be back to normal and for Oz to be just the great, green, safe place it is again. And, click, 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 there we go. So then they all end up back in Oz, and then they have this kind of like reminiscent of the award scene from Star Wars, where, TikTok is shined up and he's as bright gold as C-3PO by the end of that movie. Wow, there really are a lot of parallels, actually. And Bellina is like on this tufted pillow with like a medal around her neck. And they're all begging Dorothy to be the Scarecrow's queen. They're begging her to be Queen of Oz, rule side by side with the Scarecrow. But then Blonde Girl shows up in a mirror. And Dorothy runs up to her. She's like, I thought you drowned. And she's like, help me out of the glass. Just super calm and collected in this gorgeous gown with this crazy crown. And Dorothy just, helps her out of the glass. And Jack goes, Mom! My real mom! And find out she's Ozma, who in the book is who Tip has been unknowing to himself this whole time. Tip is Ozma in disguise. Ozma is the rightful Queen of Oz. Her father was the King of Oz before the wizard came in and staged his own coup. The wizard's not the good guy. Wicked had it right. The wizard has never been the good guy. But she was sent to live with Mombi in hiding, basically, so that, she could never restore her royal line. So in this one, Ozma comes back, claims her throne. Sorry, Scarecrow, you had your shot, which he seems totally fine with. And, she's like, you can still stay. That's fine. Like, you're my sister. You are, if nothing else, kind of an extension of myself. And so Dorothy is declared the official Princess of Oz. And Dorothy's like, yeah, we both know I gotta go home. And so she's like, all right, but I'm going to be checking on you from time to time. And even Bellina's just like, I ain't going back. They're going to cook me there. I'm on a pillow here. So Bellina stays behind, the only one with any sense in that movie. And so Dorothy ends up going back. And for now, at least, if they had continued with more of the sequels and everything like that, she would have been back very quickly. But yeah, that's Return to Oz. She goes back and she sees Ozma in the mirror one last time, and it's just like, yep. And you know what? I'm going to stop talking about Oz so my aunt can get off my back and stop trying to electrocute me. Also, just in a sidebar, they find out when Dorothy gets back that the doctor died because the hospital was struck by lightning, and he went back in not to save the patients in the basement, but to save his machines. So he went down with the ship. The nurse ends up in prison, basically, because they found out what was going on there. Reckless. To say malpractice is much, much too much of an understatement. But yeah, that's Return to Oz. I absolutely love that movie. I don't think anyone really talks about it nearly enough. I watch it when I'm sad. In all honesty, I watched that movie on 9/11 to calm me down. So, I really hope that you liked this review, and I really hope that you like and subscribe, share if that's your thing. I just really like talking about stuff to get the conversation going. I really hope that you can, if you haven't seen it and you end up watching it, comment what you think about it. If you have seen it and you think I'm totally crazy for talking it up so much, that's fine too. Let's talk about it. Let's have a civilized conversation. I like those. I can talk about this stuff all day long. So I really, really hope that you like the show, and I'll be talking about more stuff that either you've seen and forgotten about, or seen and maybe it deserves a second thought, or maybe you thought it was a fever dream, and I'm here to let you know that it's not, and we can revisit it together like an old friend. So I'm Obscure Girl, and thank you so much for visiting my show, and see you next time. The rest is confetti.